the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, Latin, Pauperes commilitones Christi Templique Salomonici, commonly known as the Knights Templar, the Order of the Temple, French, Ordre du Temple or Templiers, or simply as Templars, were among the most wealthy and powerful of the Western Christian military orders and were among the most prominent actors of the Christian finance. The organization existed for nearly 2 centuries during the Middle Ages. Officially endorsed by the Catholic Church around 1129, the order became a favored charity throughout Christendom and grew rapidly in membership and power. Templar Knights, in their distinctive white mantles with a red cross, were among the most skilled fighting units of the Crusades. Non-combatant members of the order managed a large economic infrastructure throughout Christendom, innovating financial techniques that were an early form of banking, and building fortifications across Europe and the Holy Land. The Templars' existence was tied closely to the Crusades. When the Holy Land was lost, support for the order faded. Rumors about the Templars' secret initiation ceremony created mistrust, and King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the order, took advantage of the situation. In 1307, many of the order's members in France were arrested, tortured into giving false confessions, and then burned at the stake. Under pressure from King Philip, Pope Clement V disbanded the order in 1312. The abrupt disappearance of a major part of the European infrastructure gave rise to speculation and legends, which have kept the Templar name alive into the modern day. After the First Crusade recaptured Jerusalem in 1099, many Christian pilgrims traveled to visit what they referred to as the holy places. However, though the city of Jerusalem was under relatively secure control, the rest of Outremer was not. Bandits abounded, and pilgrims were routinely slaughtered, sometimes by the hundreds, as they attempted to make the journey from the coastline at Jaffa into the Holy Land. In 1120, the French knight Hugues de Payens approached King Baldwin II of Jerusalem and Warmond, Patriarch of Jerusalem, and proposed creating a monastic order for the protection of these pilgrims. King Baldwin and Patriarch Warmond agreed to the request, probably at the Council of Nablus in January 1120, and the king granted the Templars a headquarters in the wing of the royal palace on the Temple Mount in the captured Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Temple Mount had a mystique because it was above what was believed to be the ruins of the Temple of Solomon. The Crusaders therefore referred to the Al-Aqsa Mosque as Solomon's Temple, and it was from this location that the new order took the name of Poor Knights of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, or Templar Knights. The order, with about 9 knights including Godfrey de Saint-Omer and André de Montbard, had few financial resources and relied on donations to survive. Their emblem was of 2 knights riding on a single horse, emphasizing the order's poverty. The impoverished status of the Templars did not last long. They had a powerful advocate in Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, a leading church figure and a nephew of André de Montbard, one of the founding knights. Bernard put his weight behind them and wrote persuasively on their behalf in the letter in praise of the new knighthood, and in 1129, at the Council of Troyes, he led a group of leading churchmen to officially approve and endorse the order on behalf of the church. With this formal blessing, the Templars became a favored charity throughout Christendom, receiving money, land, businesses, and noble-born sons from families who were eager to help with the fight in the Holy Land. Another major benefit came in 1139, when Pope Innocent II's papal bull Om Datum Optimum exempted the order from obedience to local laws. This ruling meant that the Templars could pass freely through all borders, were not required to pay any taxes, and were exempt from all authority except that of the Pope. With its clear mission and ample resources, the order grew rapidly. Templars were often the advance force in key battles of the Crusades, as the heavily armored knights on their war horses would set out to charge at the enemy, in an attempt to break opposition lines. One of their most famous victories was in 1177 during the Battle of Montgisard, where some 500 Templar knights helped several thousand infantry to defeat Saladin's army of more than 26,000 soldiers. Although the primary mission of the order was military, relatively few members were combatants. The others acted in support positions to assist the knights and to manage the financial infrastructure. The Templar order, though its members were sworn to individual poverty, was given control of wealth beyond direct donations. A nobleman who was interested in participating in the Crusades might place all his assets under Templar management while he was away, accumulating wealth in this manner throughout Christendom and the Outremer. The order in 1150 began generating letters of credit for pilgrims journeying to the Holy Land. Pilgrims deposited their valuables with a local Templar preceptory before embarking, received a document indicating the value of their deposit, then used that document upon arrival in the Holy Land to retrieve their funds. This innovative arrangement was an early form of banking and may have been the first formal system to support the use of checks. It improved the safety of pilgrims by making them less attractive targets for thieves, and also contributed to the Templar coffers. Based on this mix of donations and business dealing, the Templars established financial networks across the whole of Christendom. They acquired large tracts of land, both in Europe and the Middle East. They bought and managed farms and vineyards. They built churches and castles. They were involved in manufacturing, import and export. They had their own fleet of ships, and at one point they even owned the entire island of Cyprus. The Order of the Knights Templar arguably qualifies as the world's first multinational corporation. In the mid-12th century, the tide began to turn in the Crusades. The Muslim world had become more united under effective leaders such as Saladin, and dissension arose among Christian factions in and concerning the Holy Land. The Knights Templar were occasionally at odds with the two other Christian military orders, the Knights Hospitaller and the Teutonic Knights, and decades of internecine feuds weakened Christian positions, politically and militarily. After the Templars were involved in several unsuccessful campaigns, including the pivotal Battle of the Horns of Hattin, Jerusalem was captured by Saladin's forces in 1187. The Crusaders regained the city in 1229. Without Templar aid, but held it only briefly. In 1244, the Qismi Turks recaptured Jerusalem, and the city did not return to Western control until 1917 when the British captured it from the Ottoman Turks. The Templars were forced to relocate their headquarters to other cities in the north, such as the seaport of Acre, which they held for the next century. It was lost in 1291, followed by their last mainland strongholds, Tortosa, Tartus in what is now Syria, and Idlib in present-day Israel. Their headquarters then moved to Limas along the island of Cyprus, and they also attempted to maintain a garrison on tiny Awad Island, just off the coast from Tortosa. In 1300, there was some attempt to engage in coordinated military efforts with the Mongols via a new invasion force at Awad. In 1302 or 1303, however, the Templars lost the island to the Egyptian Mamluks in the siege of Awad. With the island gone, the Crusaders lost their last foothold in the Holy Land. With the Order's military mission now less important, support for the organization began to dwindle. The situation was however complex, as over the 200 years of their existence, the Templars had become a part of daily life throughout Christendom. The organization's Templar houses, hundreds of which were dotted throughout Europe and the Near East, gave them a widespread presence at the local level. The Templars still managed many businesses, and many Europeans had daily contact with the Templar network, such as by working at a Templar farm or vineyard, or using the Order as a bank in which to store personal valuables. The Order was still not subject to local government, making it everywhere a state within a state. Its standing army, though it no longer had a well-defined mission, could pass freely through all borders. This situation heightened tensions with some European nobility, especially as the Templars were indicating an interest in founding their own monastic state, just as the Teutonic Knights had done in Prussia and the Knights Hospitaller were doing with Rhodes. Arrests, charges and dissolution. In 1305, the new Pope Clement V, based in France, sent letters to both the Templar Grand Master Jacques de Molay and the Hospitaller Grand Master Fulk de Villeret to discuss the possibility of merging the two orders. Neither was amenable to the idea, but Pope Clement persisted, and in 1306 he invited both Grand Masters to France to discuss the matter. De Molay arrived first in early 1307, but de Villeret was delayed for several months. While waiting, de Molay and Clement discussed criminal charges that had been made, it seems, 2 years prior by an ousted Templar and had been taken up by the King of France and his ministers. It was generally agreed that the charges were false, but Clement sent King Philip IV of France a written request for assistance in the investigation. According to some historians, King Philip, who was already deeply in debt to the Templars from his war with the English, decided to seize upon the rumors for his own purposes. He began pressuring the Church to take action against the order, as a way of freeing himself from his debts. Recent studies emphasize the political and religious motivations of the French king. It seems that, with the discovery and repression of the Templars' heresy, the Capetian monarchy claimed for itself the mystic foundations of the papal theocracy. The Temple case was the last step of a process of appropriating these foundations, which had begun with the Franco-Papal rift at the time of Boniface VIII. Being the ultimate defender of the Catholic faith, the Capetian king was invested with a Christ-like function that put him above the Pope. What was at stake in the Templars' trial was the establishment of a royal theocracy. On Friday, the 13th of October 1307, a date sometimes spuriously linked with the origin of the Friday the 13th superstition, Philip ordered de Molay and scores of other French Templars to be simultaneously arrested. The arrest warrant started with the phrase, Dieu n'est pas content, nous avons des ennemis de la foi dans le royaume, God is not pleased. We have enemies of the faith in the kingdom. The Templars were charged with numerous offences, including apostasy, idolatry, heresy, obscene rituals and homosexuality, financial corruption and fraud, and secrecy. Many of the accused confessed to these charges under torture, and these confessions, even though obtained under duress, caused a scandal in Paris. All interrogations were recorded on a 30-meter-long parchment, kept at the Archives Nationales in Paris. The prisoners were coerced to confess that they had spat on the cross. Moi Raymond de la Fère, 21 ans, reconnais que, j'ai, croque trois fois sur la croix, mais de bouchet pas de cœur. Free translation, I, Raymond de la Fère, 21 years old, admit that I have spat 3 times on the cross, but only from my mouth and not from my heart. The Templars were accused of idolatry. After more bullying from Philip, Pope Clement then issued the papal bull Pastoralis Praeeminentiae on the 22nd of November 1307, which instructed all Christian monarchs in Europe to arrest all Templars and seize their assets. Pope Clement called for papal hearings to determine the Templars' guilt or innocence, and once freed of the Inquisitors' torture, many Templars recanted their confessions. Some had sufficient legal experience to defend themselves in the trials, but in 1310 Philip blocked this attempt, using the previously forced confessions to have dozens of Templars burned at the stake in Paris. With Philip threatening military action unless the Pope complied with his wishes, Pope Clement finally agreed to disband the order, citing the public scandal that had been generated by the confessions. At the Council of Vienne in 1312, he issued a series of papal bulls, including Vox in Excelso, which officially dissolved the order, and Ad Providam, which turned over most Templar assets to the hospitars. As for the leaders of the order, the elderly Grand Master Jacques de Molay, who had confessed under torture, retracted his confession. Geoffroy de Charny, preceptor of Normandy, also retracted his confession and insisted on his innocence. Both men were declared guilty of being relapsed heretics, and they were sentenced to burn alive at the stake in Paris on the 18th of March 1314. De Molay reportedly remained defiant to the end, asking to be tied in such a way that he could face the Notre Dame Cathedral and hold his hands together in prayer. According to legend, he called out from the flames that both Pope Clement and King Philip would soon meet him before God. His actual words were recorded on the parchment as follows: Dieu sait qui est et abesh. Il va bientôt arriver malgré ceux qui nuent condamnés et morts. Free translation, God knows who is wrong and has sinned. Soon a calamity will occur to those who have condemned us to death. Pope Clement died only a month later, and King Philip died in a hunting accident before the end of the year. With the last of the order's leaders gone, the remaining Templars around Europe were either arrested and tried under the papal investigation, with virtually none convicted, absorbed into other military orders such as the Knights Hospitaller, or pensioned off and allowed to live out their days peacefully. By papal decree, the property of the Templars was transferred to the Order of Hospitallers, which also absorbed many of the Templars' members. In effect, the dissolution of the Templars could be seen as the merger of the two rival orders. Some may have fled to other territories outside papal control, such as excommunicated Scotland or to Switzerland. Templar organizations in Portugal simply changed their name, from Knights Templar to Knights of Christ. And September 2001, a document known as the Chinon Parchment dated 20 August 1308 was discovered in the Vatican secret archives by Barbara Frail, apparently after having been filed in the wrong place in 1628. It is a record of the trial of the Templars and shows that Clement absolved the Templars of all heresies in 1308 before formally disbanding the order in 1312. As did another Chinon parchment dated 20 August 1308 addressed to Philip IV of France, also mentioning that all Templars that had confessed to heresy were restored to the sacraments and to the unity of the Church. This other Chinon parchment has been well known to historians, having been published by Etienne Balouse in 1693, and by Pierre Dupuy in 1751. The current position of the Roman Catholic Church is that the medieval persecution of the Knights Templar was unjust, that nothing was inherently wrong with the order or its rule, and that Pope Clement was pressed into his actions by the magnitude of the public scandal and by the dominating influence of King Philip IV, who was Clement's relative. The Templars were organized as a monastic order similar to Bernard's Cistercian order, which was considered the first effective international organization in Europe. The organizational structure had a strong chain of authority. Each country with a major Templar presence, France, England, Aragon, Portugal, Poitou, Apulia, Jerusalem, Tripoli, Antioch, Anjou, Hungary, and Croatia, had a master of the order for the Templars in that region. All of them were subject to the Grand Master, appointed for life, who oversaw both the order's military efforts in the East and their financial holdings in the West. The Grand Master exercised his authority via the Visitors General of the order, who were knights specially appointed by the Grand Master and Convent of Jerusalem to visit the different provinces, correct malpractices, introduce new regulations, and resolve important disputes. The Visitors General had the power to remove knights from office and to suspend the master of the province concerned. No precise numbers exist, but it is estimated that at the order's peak there were between 15,000 and 20,000 Templars, of whom about a tenth were actual knights. There was a threefold division of the ranks of the Templars: the noble knights, the non-noble sergeants, and the chaplains. The Templars did not perform knighting ceremonies, so any knight wishing to become a Knight Templar had to already be a knight. They were the most visible branch of the order, and wore the famous white mantles to symbolize their purity and chastity. They were equipped as heavy cavalry, with 3 or 4 horses and 1 or 2 squires. Squires were generally not members of the order but were instead outsiders who were hired for a set period of time. Beneath the knights in the order and drawn from non-noble families were the sergeants. They brought vital skills and trades such as blacksmithing and building, and administered many of the order's European properties. In the Crusader states, they fought alongside the knights as light cavalry with a single horse. Several of the order's most senior positions were reserved for sergeants, including the post of commander of the Vault of Acre, who was the de facto admiral of the Templar fleet. The sergeants wore black or brown. From 1139, chaplains constituted a third Templar class. They were ordained priests who cared for the Templars' spiritual needs. All 3 classes of brother wore the order's Red Cross patty. Starting with founder Hugues de Payens in 1118 to 1119, the order's highest office was that of Grand Master, a position which was held for life. Though considering the martial nature of the order, this could mean a very short tenure. All but 2 of the Grand Masters died in office, and several died during military campaigns. For example, during the siege of Ascalon in 1153, Grand Master Bernard de Tremolay led a group of 40 Templars through a breach in the city walls. When the rest of the Crusader army did not follow, the Templars, including their Grand Master, were surrounded and beheaded. Grand Master Gerard de Riedfort was beheaded by Saladin in 1189 at the Siege of Acre. The Grand Master oversaw all of the operations of the order, including both the military operations in the Holy Land and Eastern Europe and the Templars' financial and business dealings in Western Europe. Some Grand Masters also served as battlefield commanders, though this was not always wise. Several blunders in de Riedfort's combat leadership contributed to the devastating defeat at the Battle of Hattin. The last Grand Master was Jacques de Molay, burned at the stake in Paris in 1314 by order of King Philip IV. It was Bernard de Clairvaux and founder Hugues de Payens who devised the specific code of behavior for the Templar order, known to modern historians as the Latin Rule. Its 72 clauses defined the ideal behavior for the knights, such as the types of garments they were to wear and how many horses they could have. Knights were to take their meals in silence, eat meat no more than 3 times per week, and not have physical contact of any kind with women, even members of their own family. A master of the order was assigned 4 horses, and 1 chaplain brother and 1 clerk with 3 horses, and 1 sergeant brother with 2 horses, and 1 gentleman valet to carry his shield and lance, with 1 horse. As the order grew, more guidelines were added, and the original list of 72 clauses was expanded to several hundred in its final form. The knights wore a white surcoat with a red cross and a white mantle also with a red cross. The sergeants wore a black tunic with a red cross on the front and a black or brown mantle. The white mantle was assigned to the Templars at the Council of Droz in 1129, and the cross was most probably added to their robes at the launch of the Second Crusade in 1147. When Pope Eugenius III, King Louis VII of France, and many other notables attended a meeting of the French Templars at their headquarters near Paris. According to their rule, the knights were to wear the white mantle at all times, even being forbidden to eat or drink unless they were wearing it. The red cross that the Templars wore on their robes was a symbol of martyrdom, and to die in combat was considered a great honor that assured a place in heaven. There was a cardinal rule that the warriors of the order should never surrender unless the Templar flag had fallen, and even then they were first to try to regroup with another of the Christian orders, such as that of the Hospiters. Only after all flags had fallen were they allowed to leave the battlefield. This uncompromising principle, along with their reputation for courage, excellent training, and heavy armament, made the Templars one of the most feared combat forces in medieval times. Initiation, known as receptio, into the order, was a profound commitment and involved a solemn ceremony. Outsiders were discouraged from attending the ceremony, which roused the suspicions of medieval inquisitors during the later trials. New members had to willingly sign over all of their wealth and goods to the order and take vows of poverty, chastity, piety, and obedience. Most brothers joined for life, although some were allowed to join for a set period. Sometimes a married man was allowed to join if he had his wife's permission, but he was not allowed to wear the white mantle. With their military mission and extensive financial resources, the Knights Templar funded a large number of building projects around Europe and the Holy Land. Many of these structures are still standing. Many sites also maintain the name Temple because of centuries-old association with the Templars. For example, some of the Templars' lands in London were later rented to lawyers, which led to the names of the Temple Bar Gateway and the Temple Tube Station. 2 of the 4 Inns of Court which may call members to act as barristers are the Inner Temple and Middle Temple. Distinctive architectural elements of Templar buildings include the use of the image of 2 knights on a single horse, representing the knight's poverty, and round buildings designed to resemble the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. The story of the persecution and sudden dissolution of the secretive yet powerful medieval Templars has drawn many other groups to use alleged connections with the Templars as a way of enhancing their own image and mystery. There is no clear historical connection between the Knights Templar, which were dismantled in the rolls of the Catholic Church in 1309 with the martyrdom of Jacques de Molay, and any of the modern organizations, of which, except for the Scottish Order, the earliest emerged publicly in the 18th century. There is often public confusion and many overlook the 400-year gap. However, in 1853, Napoleon III officially recognized the OSMth. The order operates on the basis of the traditions of the medieval Knights Templar, celebrating the spirit of, but not claiming direct descent from the ancient order founded by Hugues de Payens in 1118 and dissolved by Pope Clement V in 1312. Since at least the 18th century, Freemasonry has incorporated Templar symbols and rituals in a number of Masonic bodies, most notably, the Order of the Temple. The final order joined in the United Religious, Military and Masonic Orders of the Temple and of St. John of Jerusalem, Palestine, Rhodes and Malta, commonly known as the Knights Templar. One theory of the origins of Freemasonry claims direct descent from the historical Knights Templar through its final 14th century members who took refuge in Scotland, whose king, Robert the Bruce, was excommunicated by the Roman Catholic Church at the time, or in Portugal where the order changed its name to Knights of Christ, other members having joined Knights of St. John. There have even been claims that some of the Templars who made it to Scotland contributed to the Scots' victory at Bannockburn. This theory is usually deprecated on grounds of lack of evidence by both Masonic authorities and historians. The Roman Catholic Church has historically opposed Freemasonry since it began to emerge, under the belief the group is a secret society and has a deeply hidden agenda that opposes the Church and its beliefs. Members of the Church found to be Freemasons were in the early 20th century, commonly excommunicated. This has often led to the misguided belief that the Church somehow also opposed the Knights Templar. However, the Church makes distinction between the Templars, a public monastic order, and secret societies. Excommunication as an action taken against Catholics who were found to be Freemason, was lifted by Pope John Paul II in the 1980s. However, in the same papal bull he reiterated his predecessor's strong opposition to Freemasonry, stating that any person who is involved in a secret society and takes communion is putting their soul in grave danger. The Knights Templar have become associated with legends concerning secrets and mysteries handed down to the select from ancient times. Rumors circulated even during the time of the Templars themselves. Freemasonic writers added their own speculations in the 19th century, and further fictional embellishments have been added in popular novels such as Ivanhoe, Foucault's Pendulum, The Lost Symbol, and the Da Vinci Code. Modern movies such as National Treasure and Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, and video games such as Assassin's Creed, The Secret World and Broken Sword. Many of the Templar legends are connected with the Order's early occupation of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem and speculation about what relics the Templars may have found there, such as the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant. That the Templars were in possession of some relics is certain. Many churches still display holy relics such as the bones of a saint, a scrap of cloth once worn by a holy man, or the skull of a martyr. The Templars did the same. They were documented as having a piece of the true cross, which the Bishop of Acre carried into battle at the disastrous Horns of Hattin. When the battle was lost, Saladin captured the relic, which was then ransomed back to the Crusaders when the Muslims surrendered the city of Acre in 1191. The Templars were also rumored to possess the head of Saint Euphemia of Chalcedon, and the subject of relics came up during the Inquisition of the Templars, as several trial documents refer to the supposed worship of an idol of some type, referred to in some cases as a cat, a bearded head, or in some cases as Baphomet. This accusation of idol worship levied against the Templars has also led to the modern mistaken belief by some that the Templars practiced witchcraft. However, modern scholars generally explain the name Baphomet from the trial documents as simply a French misspelling of the name Muhammad. The Holy Grail quickly became associated with the Templars, even in the 12th century. The first Grail romance, Le Conte du Graal, was written around 1180 by Christian de Troyes, who came from the same area where the Council of Troyes had officially sanctioned the Templars' order. Perhaps 20 years later, Parzival, Wolfram von Eschenbach's version of the tale, refers to knights called Templars guarding the Grail Kingdom. Another hero of the Grail quest, Sir Galahad, a 13th century literary invention of monks from St. Bernard's Cistercian order, was depicted bearing a shield with the cross of St. George, similar to the Templars' insignia. This version presented the Holy Grail as a Christian relic. A legend developed that since the Templars had their headquarters at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, they must have excavated in search of relics, found the Grail, and then proceeded to keep it in secret and guard it with their lives. However, in the extensive documents of the Templar Inquisition there was never a single mention of anything like a Grail relic, let alone its possession by the Templars, nor is there any evidence that a Templar wrote a Grail romance. In reality, most mainstream scholars agree that the story of the Grail was just that, a literary fiction that began circulating in medieval times. Another legendary object that is claimed to have some connection with the Templars is the Shroud of Turin. In 1357, the shroud was first publicly displayed by the widow of a nobleman known as Geoffrey of Charny, described by some sources as being a member of the family of the grandson of Geoffroy de Charny, who was burned at the stake with de Molay. The shroud's origins are still a matter of controversy, but in 1988, a carbon dating analysis concluded that the shroud was made between 1260 and 1390, a span that includes the last half-century of the Templars' existence. The validity of the dating methodology has subsequently been called into question, and the age of the shroud is still the subject of much debate.